Hey, today we're introducing you to our newest team member. Her name is Elsie Nilsson. Welcome, Elsie.
Thank you.
Yes, this is great. We are super excited to introduce you to our newest person to our team. And so, Elsie, can you tell us first off, what do you do for The Forge?
Well, I part-time edit. Well, Dad does most of the editing. I've started doing.
Oh, no. All right, hold on. Nope, that's not going to work. So you need to tell us the truth that you do almost all the editing and that you're better at it than your dad is. Tell us the truth.
Well,
It's okay.
Actually, that's partly true. I do catch a little bit more of the background stuff than he does, but I'm not as quick at it as he is.
Well, we're excited to have you on board and to see how you kind of flourish into this new role. And so we're thankful for you. We're grateful for you. I'm sure you already know this because you've had to listen to both your dad and my voice a lot. But when we go through the podcast, we usually ask our guests one very important question, and that is, what do you prefer, Star Wars or Star Trek?
Well,
It's such a tough question.
yeah, because Owen loves Star Wars, Dad loves Star Trek. They both like them equally, and everybody else doesn't care.
And everybody else, so you would say
Everybody
you're pretty
else
much
is
a tie.
neutral.
You're just like the Nielsen neutral. I like that. I like that alliteration.
Yeah,
well, that's another good question that we can ask you, Elsie. How do you feel about alliteration, which is like when a word starts with the same letter as a previous word, like neutral Nielsen? How do you feel about that?
That one?
Yeah. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Do you wish people never used it? Do you want people to use it more? What do you think?
Alliteration?
Yeah.
Well, alliteration's great, I guess.
Yes. Thank you. It is great. I'm so appreciative for that. That's going to go down in the books. That alliteration is great because it really is.
I don't like alliteration.
Well, why not?
Yeah, why not?
Like, you can get a nickname that's like Rockin' Ryan.
I mean, what's better than Rockin' Ryan?
You know, that's a very good point. I hadn't thought of it that way.
I think she might have sold you on alliteration now.
Yeah.
What if we call you like Radical Rockin' Ryan?
I think we went from bad to worse. Yeah.
And as you can tell, a lot of this stuff Elsie's probably just going to edit out because she knows what the listeners really want to hear. So from now on, if you really like the podcast, a lot of it is probably going to be because of, first, our guest, but then second, because of Elsie, which is good. So, Elsie, tell me a little bit about your siblings. Who's the most competitive out of the four of you?
Owen.
Who wins the most board games?
Clara.
Who is always the one to finish the last of the dessert or the snacks?
Well, last night it was me, but it always depends on who gets there first and how much they take.
Okay. So what do you think some ways that God's going to work through you in this form of editing that you're looking forward to? Is there anything you're really looking forward to while you're doing this editing?
Taking out unnecessary parts in the podcast and making people focus more on the mission.
Oh,
wow. That's pretty great.
That is a really good,
pretty sweet.
Really good answer. It is great to have Elsie. We're starting homeschooling this year because of partly because of the pandemic, but also just because we wanted to do ministry together as a family. So when I started this role with the CLB, school schedule doesn't line up with my schedule very well. So this is something we've wanted to do for a long time, and the pandemic's made it really a lot easier. And from the beginning, that we knew that we wanted to do ministry together as a family, but it was so hard to find ways to do that in this new role. It's taken a while. And so I'm just really excited that this has become a way that Elsie and I can be part of a team.
Yeah, he asked my siblings and I if any of us wanted to try out editing, and I was like, oh, sure. And everybody else was like, nah.
Nah. Well, now get ready, because once we get super popular and stuff, they're going to be wanting to be the ones editing, and you can be like, nope, sorry, I got in before they were popular, and now you can just ride on my coattails. So here's the really important question: how much are you getting paid to do this gig? $1,000 an episode?
That's not to be discussed at this time.
Very good.
Ooh.
So maybe we'll have to supplement with like forms of treats and appreciational pat on the backs. What do you think of that?
I don't know.
All right.
She gets paid the same that you get paid, Mike.
Oh man. Wow.
Right?
I mean, I get paid in rainbows and compliments.
Oh,
That's about the same.
Solid.
okay.
Solid.
Yeah.
All right. So how should we sign off?
Well, I just want to say, I see the team doing this podcast growing over time. I think we'll have other people. We want to see other people start joining as hosts, and there's a lot of behind the scenes work. Editing, I do think we'll have other people helping with editing. But I think it's just so fun that the first person we've added to our team is Elsie. So
Totally
welcome,
fun.
welcome to the
totally
crew.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Welcome to the coolest crew. I guess we should say self-promoted coolest crew you'll ever be a part of.
Sounds like something Dad would say.
Oof.
I think that was an insult.
Yeah, I was wondering, is that a compliment or an insult? That's where we should just cut it.
Smart.
Right there. Cut.
No comment.
Yeah.
He's becoming very mature and wise.
Solid.
Thanks, Mike, and
Welcome.
thank you, Elsie. Thanks for
Welcome,
your help.
Elsie. We're happy to have you.
Thank you.
Hello and welcome to the CLB Forge podcast. This is the show to help equip you and your church for mission, ministry, and multiplying disciples. I'm Mike Natal.
And I'm Ryan Nilsson. Welcome to episode 15. Mike, this is a very unique episode because there's two
milestone.
Two milestones I think about it.
Yeah.
One is that this is the first time you and I are recording shoulder to shoulder, even though it's only the intro for this episode.
Mm-hmm.
This is great to be right here with you.
Yeah.
Pretty awesome.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, the scenery is brilliant. It is lovely, and it is wonderful to get outside in God's creation, especially
Absolutely.
on a non-humid day, which this summer seems to be very few and far between. So we're happy that we could gather on a nice and cool, a little breezy day today, and great scenery in the background.
Yeah.
The sweet pond.
Yeah.
So
the other milestone is kind of a tragic one, and that is that Mike and I did not. This episode also is the first time we're together, and
obviously I make you very, very uneasy.
It's the first time we're together, and the first time we're apart.
We're apart
because we're gonna listen to an interview that I did with Lindsay, but you weren't there, and it just wasn't the same without you.
Yeah, I mean, I listened to it. You guys did a great job without me, so
Thanks.
I was super encouraged to hear that. It was unfortunate. Lindsay and I look forward to going to Tuscarora every year, especially for pastor school. Pastor school is a great time where Tuscarora opens up the camp to pastors of the Eastern region and some others too. I mean, they've opened it up to different professors who have come out and different other pastors who might need a little bit of a getaway. And it's great because it's a full week of just being pampered. I can't explain it other than that. Like they do such a great job welcoming us. The food is always fantastic. The fellowship is great. And Tuscarora really just... And it's actually perfect, that we're talking like Lindsay during this episode is going to talk all about stewardship. And I really feel like Tuscarora looks at caring for their pastors in the region as a form of stewardship, which is great. So this really dovetails in perfectly with what Lindsay's going to talk about in today's episode. And so Tuscarora has been really near and dear to my heart personally. I worked at Tuscarora for a number of years. I actually lost count. I think it was 7. It was probably 7. And it was really integral in growing my faith and really helping to cultivate my desire to go into full-time ministry. So I'm super appreciative for Tuscarora. I'm sure my parents are super appreciative for Tuscarora because every summer I work there, and the less you have to deal with Mike, the better. So, I mean, I am fully aware of that. And so, Tuscarora has been great. Do you want to say anything about Tuscarora?
Yeah, Tuscarora really had a special place in my growing up years as well. So it's one of the key moments in my spiritual journey happened at Tuscarora, and I actually talk about it not in this episode, but in another one coming up. So I'll just for now.
Yeah,
I'll just
no spoilers. Keep those in. We don't want to lose guests.
Yeah.
So we're gonna keep you in suspense.
That's gonna really hook them.
I know.
That's gonna
really
really
be like,
hook them.
I need to hear about Ryan's story about Tuscarora. So
So it's a key part of my walk with Christ. Was because of Tuscarora. So I actually realized though, this is actually the second interview I did without you, but we're showing it first. I got to be clear about that.
I'm sure that the listeners will know the difference because they'll see how smooth you are between the different interviews just with and without.
How at ease and relaxed I am.
Oh, yeah. It's just great.
And
it's great.
No one's arguing with me about Star Trek and Star Wars.
Right. Because everyone just knows that Star Wars is the best. So, and actually right now we could probably just come to blows if you want. Like we could just have like a Coliseum battle to see which one's better.
Yeah. So anyway, I hope you enjoy the episode.
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, before we get to it, I do want to tell you our guest is Lindsay Rosado, and she is the manager of ministry advancement at Tuscarora. She does a fantastic job with at least from my point of view, the fantastic job that she does is through social media. She's fantastic with everything that she posts and the way that she interacts with people, and I'm super encouraged by that. But that's not all that she does. She does a lot of other things for Tuscarora to keep them relevant and moving forward as well. And so today's episode, she's going to be talking about developing a stewardship model for your ministry, which is great.
Yeah,
and it's something that needs to be talked about.
Some great principles about stewardship for any ministry setting, but especially for churches. So it's a great interview. I know you've already listened to it.
Yeah,
but I wanna, when we do the outro, you're gonna have to tell me how you felt about what she had to say about Settlers of Catan. And with that,
yo, should we high five? Because we can do that now. You want a high five?
Yeah, and we'll pretend to freeze. So with that, we'll give you the show. Lindsay, welcome to the CLB Forge podcast.
Thank you.
It's great to have you as our guest today.
Thank you so much.
So I'm here with Lindsay Rosado at Tuscarora Inn Conference Center. Did I say the name? Did I get the correct title?
Tuscarora. Mm-hmm.
Tuscarora. All right. And I'm here for Pastor School, which is a great week of ministry that you provide to pastors in the Eastern region, pastors and their families. And we're here in the Inn Lounge. Is that right?
Yep.
Just off the main dining hall. Mm-hmm. And anyway, thanks for being our guest.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. And it's very unusual for me to be recording a podcast without Mike. It's only the second time. So I feel obligated. He would make some kind of strange trivia reference to some intersection that you've had in his life. Like he slept on your deck for a month, or you like the same sports teams. So do you have any obligatory random connections with Mike Natal that we need to know about?
I don't, but I do remember one time when he was here for the men's retreat 2 years ago when he asked me to play Settlers of Catan, and I was very clear that I don't play that game because I don't find it to be very much fun. And he told me you've never played it with me, and I was like, I don't think it's gonna matter. So I've refused to play Settlers with Mike Natal, but that's about as far as it goes.
Wow.
Yeah, no, I don't like that game.
And you didn't play it?
I did not, no.
Have you ever played it?
I've played it one time, and what I've discovered about Settlers is that if you've never played it before, you've lost the game in the first 2 minutes. Like, that's it. You're set up poorly, and you're never going to recover. And I played it with a bunch of jerks who then spent the whole game being like, well, if you'd done this in the first 60 seconds. And I'm like, well, I didn't know that part of the game. So I've never played it again since that one debacle. I tell people I don't play Settlers, I don't play Risk. Those are my 2 games. And Risk, I just get too angry. So
yeah, it's like a destroyer of relationships.
Yes.
Risk. I love Risk. I like Settlers a lot too.
I hear other people enjoy it. I just assume that something bad has happened to them as children, that they're broken inside and they enjoy that awful game. But that's all I've got. I will not test this hypothesis. I will not try to play it again. It was too little fun the first time.
You've probably spoken more truth than any of us Settlers players realize.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, man. Oh, that's great. All right. So, Lindsay, just starting out here, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your spiritual journey.
Yeah. So I grew up in Staten Island, New York, and kind of a black sheep from the beginning. So I was a very tall Norwegian girl in very Italian Staten Island. I was raised in a very Catholic community. So all of my friends left school early to go to church on Wednesday afternoons. All my friends got their first communion in 2nd grade. They got confirmed in 5th grade, which when you're a Lutheran girl, you're like, this is insane. And so I always felt kind of out of what the norm, what all of my friends were doing. And then I was in 7th grade and I went to go see a production at a church on Staten Island that was very much like a scare people into believing in Jesus show. It was called No Reservations. It was 4 kids in a car who got into a car accident, and 2 of them had reservations in heaven and 2 of them didn't. And I was like, that's insane. And it scared me half to death. And only I came to Teen Week at Tuscarora when I was 13 after my 8th grade year. Very out of character for me because I was very shy, very quiet at that time. Not so much anymore, but at that time I wasn't outgoing. And I came to Tuscarora not knowing anyone. And it was the first time that the gospel had been presented to me as like, no, Jesus loves you, not just Jesus loves the world, not just Jesus loves the church or Jesus loves good people. Like, Jesus loves you and he did these things for you. And I completely fell head over heels for the gospel. I was amazed at the story of sacrifice, at the story of mercy. And ever since then have just chased opportunities to be at Tuscarora throughout my whole life, because I found that each time I came here, they were definitely mountaintop experiences, but it pulled me closer and closer to the heart of Christ. So I was counseling at Junior Week, counseling at Teen Week. I was a leader for the Junior Week leadership team. And I really felt that Tuscarora was there for me when I came to know the Lord, but also pulled me through what that meant. So because of who Jesus wanted me to be and was shaping me to be through ministries like Tuscarora, I was growing through a very large public high school where I felt like I was again the black sheep. I went to Houghton College for college, which I loved, but I had a very serious faith crisis when I was there, and I was just thankful that I feel like God has protected me through each and every one of these moments of difficulty, that I was in an environment where it was okay to ask those questions, and I was being discipled and cared for and led by Christians, by my teachers, that I was being given the space to ask these questions that I was struggling with. And then so once I came through that faith crisis, I feel like I've really been, that's my testimony, is the story of that moment of I don't know if I believe this anymore, or I haven't necessarily I've accepted everything that anyone's ever taught me about Christianity, but I haven't necessarily struggled with whether or not I thought that was true myself. And that moment enabled me to do that, to say, no, I believe this. I've measured it, I've tested it, and now this is mine. And I think that was a really important moment for me. So
wow. Yeah. So your faith came through that.
Yeah.
Really strengthened.
Yeah. And so
transformed.
And then would you like me to talk a little bit about like my career after that point?
No, absolutely not. Don't. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
So I came out of college.
Don't make this too smooth, okay?
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
We're really.
Yeah. I didn't think that was smooth.
Really,
so
that's a good trick. No, let's hear about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I came out of college in 2010, not necessarily the world's greatest job market, and very quickly took a job at Wagner College on Staten Island, where my whole job was sitting in a room with a fundraising staff of students who call people. Everyone's had this experience, right? A student calls them from their alma mater and it's like, hey, can you give $25? Yeah. John Mulaney has a hilarious skit about it, where he's just like, my college called me and they were like, give me some money. And I was like, yeah, that's what they do. You put a nice innocent student on the phone and you want them to ask people for money. But I was a phone program supervisor. Through that, even though it was so awkward, and I don't know that I necessarily think phone programs are a great idea in the fundraising world, I really fell in love with fundraising at that point in time.
Are you kidding me? I think I'm gonna have a stress dream tonight about that happening to me.
Yeah. It's not a fun experience, but the kids they'd have really awful conversations, and then they'd have really incredible conversations where someone just wanted to tell them how important their experience at Wagner was. At the same time, so I worked at Wagner. I was I went from the phone program supervisor. I started working as an assistant in annual giving. Then I managed and directed the whole annual giving program for Wagner College. And then I managed their most recent capital campaign. So all this time I was falling in love with fundraising, falling in love with what it meant to partner supporters with a cause. But I was also aware that I had two loves in my life, and one of them was fundraising and one of them was ministry. And I was working through the week to do youth group on the weekends, to help at my church, to come to Tuscarora. And I felt like I had these two worlds. And I was like, wouldn't it be incredible if I could bring them together? And right around that time when I started to pray for this opportunity, I got the job offer for this job at Tuscarora. And I was like, what? Now I'm not just fundraising for something that other people believe in, but I'm fundraising for something that I believe in. And just the match of that. And even when I'm not directly fundraising, but I'm just helping in this ministry, getting to see it happen. It's just been like, this is my heart project. Like I love getting to do that for Tuscarora. It's a blessing. I'm not unaware that not everybody gets that opportunity. So I'm very thankful every day that I get to do what I do.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What a great story.
Yeah.
So tell us what's your position here? What are some of your major responsibilities?
I am the manager of ministry advancement. And basically that means that I oversee all of the development work that Tuscarora does, or the fundraising, and also the marketing component of all of our programs, our group retreats, our graphic identity, stuff like that. It's a big job. In a lot of places it would be separated. I think it makes sense that they're together here. But as anyone who works on a small team in a ministry knows, just because that's your job title and that's your responsibility doesn't mean that that's all you do.
You wear a lot of hats. Yeah.
You wear a lot of hats. And sometimes it's setting up new technology so we can get credit card readers in the snack shop, or it's serving dinner when we're short staffed with wait staff. And so it's exciting. I like it because I like being a part of those things. I like seeing the ministry happen. And I think that's when you know that you're in the place you're supposed to be, because it's like, I will do anything as long as I get to be here doing what I do. So that's really a blessing. I remember that as sometimes when I'm just like wiping tables, but it's good.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I know years ago, I picked your brain for some advice. Just several people, just said, "Oh, you got to talk to Lindsay. She is so good she understands stewardship in a way like few people do." And I was really appreciative of your advice. And then I began to notice, I mean, you yourself have a great social media presence.
Oh, thank you.
You represent the camp well, but I also began to notice a lot of the stuff that you do behind the scenes. And I could see your fingerprints on those things. And I realized, oh yeah, these are the things you're talking about. And you're making those happen. people may not know that you're there directing those things, but I've seen just remarkable things happen that I know are the result of you being a part of this team.
Oh, thank you. That's wonderful to hear.
You are welcome. So I totally got off track here. Okay. So one thing I wanted to ask you about is what's it been like being here at Tuscarora during COVID? So a lot of our audience, we're in church settings. Our listeners are primarily pastors and ministry leaders, so we know what it's been like for our churches.
Yeah.
But I know camps and conference centers, it's been a very, very challenging experience. What's it been like?
I will say it's been challenging and exciting. I really think it's been both of those things.
Okay. Yeah.
At the beginning of the pandemic, it became very clear that exactly what we do here at Tuscarora was the threat, right? Like, we gather together, we bring people together, we serve them food communally, we put them into small rooms and we tell them to breathe air at each other while they sing, and we want them to get into tight huddle groups and pray, and it's like everything we do is dangerous. So how do you move forward from that? And I think, in the beginning it was like, well, it'll be a couple weeks and then we'll bounce back. And now things are very different. So it's challenging. It's challenging to think through what your ministry is supposed to look like when it seems like exactly what you do is the problem. But it's also been really exciting. And I keep coming back to this in my own heart, is that challenges like this oftentimes beget creativity. And I think that there's a lot of things that we've gotten the chance to do here at Tuscarora because we had to, that maybe at other times would have been too difficult, too challenging to pull off, too expensive. And there's or just, well, we can't do that because we're doing these 1,800 things. Well, now we're not doing those 1,800 things anymore. So let's figure out how to stream one of our programs online, or let's figure out ways that we can do a worship concert on Facebook Live. And there's just a lot of different opportunities that have come up. Or even just, if this type of ministry doesn't work anymore, if this model that we've used for the last 50 years doesn't work anymore, what fits within our mission statement that does work now? And I think I think that's important, because it's not just what can we do. We could do a lot of things. We could be a restaurant, we could be a hotel, but that doesn't fit within our mission statement.
Yeah.
And so it's important to not take every opportunity, but to take the opportunities that matter. And I also think it's an exciting time because our entire mentality has switched, so that the answer, I keep saying this, the answer is always yes, right? It's like, I need help in the dining room. Yes, I'll help you. We need to do this. Yes, I'll figure it out. Like a couple months ago, we had the challenge of, we realized that all of our kids' programs, they all bring cash and they move cash around. And that just seemed like a giant stress and a germ contamination nightmare. And we realized, like, we really have to figure out a cashless payment system. Well, I'm not a tech, I was a communications major, right? Like, I was not a tech person, but it became clear that the only person that had the bandwidth to do it was me. And I was like, I guess I'll figure out how to do this. And it's just like, the answer is yes. Like, I have to figure it out. And so let's do it. And it's exciting because you don't know what opportunities are going to work. I'm usually surprised by what takes off, and it's exciting. There's a lot of creativity going behind the scenes. Can I give an example?
Please.
Okay. So tomorrow, or today, this afternoon, we're launching something called the Odyssey EduCamp program. And this is what I mean when you're like, well, we can't take every opportunity, but we can do something that fits within our ministry. We realized that we had an empty fall because church groups were not booking retreats. And we also saw that there was a need in our community because things are so uncertain with the school system. And we have working parents who need childcare for their kids, or we have parents that just feel ill-equipped to handle cyber education, or we have homeschool parents who are facing less social opportunities for their kids. So there were these three areas that we really felt there was a need. And so we're shaping something that's a little bit like it's mostly a day camp program. So we're going to be using all these empty meeting rooms that we have to allow kids 3 to 4 hours in the morning to go supervise through independent study. So if they're doing cyber education, they can sit there in a room with an experienced proctor who can help them with their independent study. And then in the afternoon after lunch, they're going to move into outdoor recreation, Christian Bible studies, Christian music programs, and probably some arts, music, drama, things that we can offer them that might supplement a screen time, like a cyber education. And that's going, now we have the room to do that. We can have kids come and spread out, and it's not, they're not in a classroom where they have shields and they're being closed off from each other. We can send kids outside, which is proven to be safer for COVID-19. And we looked at our assets and we looked at the need and we said, how can we match these in a way that makes sense under our mission statement? And the reception thus far to the groups that we've mentioned it to has been very positive, and we're really excited that we get to do that. And that's a completely new opportunity that has always sort of been a nice to have idea, but it didn't fit, or we didn't have the room or the work time to do it. And now we have everything. So we're getting to launch this new program that is new to this area and really is going to spread our ministry beyond the normal people that have come and enjoyed a retreat at Tuscarora.
Wow. That's exciting.
Yeah.
That sounds great. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Something that's been amazing to see, I've always known that the mindset, perspective, the attitude of the leaders of a church or ministry organization make a big difference. But it's been amazing. I've had a front row seat for that as I've been leading our denomination's COVID response.
Yeah.
Interacting with churches. I see very clearly some churches are really struggling and may close their doors, may come out of this much weaker. Some churches come out of this stronger.
Yeah.
Some ministries will come out of this stronger. And a big factor, it's not the only one, and it's not this black and white. I'm generalizing here. There's all kinds of exceptions, but one of the common factors seems to be the attitude of the leaders. The leaders who are optimistic and willing to be innovative and creative and willing to experiment, try different approaches to ministry. It has a direct impact on the success of their ministry. And it's just so fun to see that happening here at Tuscarora.
Yeah.
You're innovating and you're trying, and not everything's going to work.
Yeah.
But you're trying new approaches.
Yeah.
And with a great attitude.
Yeah.
So it's a way to go.
Thank you.
And keep it up. And I'm excited to see how your Odyssey EduCamp goes.
Yeah, me too. I'm
love
I'm
to hear
very
about
excited.
that
Isn't
more.
that a buzzword? EduCamp? I think it's fun.
Yeah. What other words can we can combine two other words to describe it? The EduCamp is super awesome.
I'll work on that. I'll try to think of something.
I'm not as good at that as you are. Okay. Yeah. All right. So now that I've run the episode into the ground, let's move on to the next question here. So I wanted to have a conversation with you about stewardship.
Yeah.
And this is a topic that is really challenging for ministry leaders to deal with, because I think ministry leaders can feel like, if I talk about stewardship and generosity, this is an aspect of being a disciple of Jesus. Yet if I talk about it, people are going to think that I'm just after their money.
Yeah.
And they're going to think I'm a money-grubbing televangelist that's raising money for a private jet or something like that. And also, on the other hand, too, it's, there's this saying that the last part of a Christian to be sanctified is their wallet. Yeah. I think talking about issues that connect to money can be really sensitive, because they're sensitive heart issues. Yeah. Because we're all broken. And I think the way we interact with generosity, you can see that a lot of the times too. So it's really a challenging subject to deal with. So I'm excited we get to talk today. Yeah. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. And first, I was wondering if you could maybe, having been a pastor for 15 years, I know that I bought into some myths or some untruths about generosity and stewardship. And so one of them that I think I carried around with for a long time was Well, I really can't help people in my church with stewardship. I can't help people be generous because I can't ask people to give. I can't invite them to give because people can't afford.
Yeah.
They can't afford to give. They can't afford to be generous.
Yeah.
What would you say to a ministry leader who says, well, I'm not going to talk about stewardship because I don't think I can. I don't think the people in my church body can do that.
Well, I mean, I think just statistically what's interesting is that each generation in America is more generous than the last. So I think that we as people are programmed to be generous. We want to give. We want to show support and love for the things that we care about. And what I've found, I have a lot of feedback. A lot of times people ask me, I don't know how you fundraise. I don't know how you ask people for money. And I never think of it that way. What I think of it as you're offering people an opportunity, that there's something. Now, this is different, I would say, in the field that I work in now and when I worked in higher education. Mm-hmm. I think that in higher ed, a lot of the fundraising model is based on loyalty and what's the word that I'm looking for?
Like an affinity? Or
not an affinity, of responsibility. Okay. Like the idea that you received an education for us and you are responsible for creating that opportunity for other people. And that there's a little bit of that pressure of, you know, we deserve you to give to us. I think working for something for Tuscarora, it's very, very different because I'm never going to someone and saying, you had a great experience at Tuscarora, help make that possible for someone else. What I'm saying is give to Tuscarora because you love us, because that love is so much stronger than any sense of responsibility. And what I've found is that people want to be a part of what we do here. They want to feel like because of them, something happens, more people get to come, the gospel goes out, that lives are changed for eternity. They want to feel like they have a role to play in that. They don't feel like they're paying it forward. Like, well, I received the gospel, so I want to make sure someone else does. It's very much they want to partner with us in the ministry that they're doing. Wow. And also, I can say going back over the last 6 months, so Tuscarora the beginning of June, so I guess it's only about 2.5 months ago now, we looked at the calendar going forward and we realized quite unhappily that we were going to be facing a $1.5 million deficit in our end budget. And it became very clear that we had to turn to the donors for support because we needed to cover, we had moved things around and we'd figured out a way, but we needed about $500,000 before the end of the year to survive. Mm-hmm. And we had no choice but to go to our donor base. And we did so incredibly little. We put out a video and just a very straightforward ask that wasn't fancy language. It wasn't telling stories. It wasn't trying to trick people into realizing that they were being asked for money. It was a very clear, this is the situation. We need your help. This is what we need you to do. And the support just came pouring in and it was incredible. And we had announced at the beginning of June that by Leisure Week, which was July 8th, so just about 38 days later, we needed to raise $250,000. And we hit that goal, which at the time felt insane. Like we've never raised that amount of money before. But because people understood the need, because people understood what their support would be going to, they were more than generous. And we can't assume that someone is not looking for a way to be helpful. They're always looking for that way. They just need to be asked and told what's needed of them. Yeah. And I think too, the important thing to remember is that generosity doesn't always mean finances. Sometimes it does, and the Bible does instruct us to give of our treasures, but it also sometimes means giving of your time and giving of your talents. Yeah. We have a lot of people who come to Tuscarora to just fix things, to clean things, to help us get the campus ready for summer, for fall, to make beds, that was another incredible example we saw this past summer. for anyone who's ever worked at Tuscarora, we have these full turnover days where the whole campus leaves and a whole campus group comes back in, and we basically have to turn over all the grounds. It's exhausting. It's an all hands on deck kind of situation, and we just didn't have the staff to do it. And we put up a notice on Facebook like, hey, we need help. And we got people to come and vacuum and wipe sinks and make beds and like just for fun for the day. And that's because they love Tuscarora. Yeah. And it's just incredible to see that kind of thing happen, because while that might not be how I choose to serve, right? I wouldn't come up and I hate housekeeping. My husband will attest to that. I'm not a housemaker. Like if I saw a post from Tuscarora that was like, hey, we need you to come up and do turnover, I'd be like, that's a hard pass. Like, no, thank you. But I might help in other ways, and I might give of I volunteered for my help with Junior Week, and I also support Tuscarora financially. So we have to offer these opportunities, because really the giver is going to benefit more than the ministry that's receiving.
Yeah. Wow. That's powerful to hear. Yeah. It's so funny how people in our situations can, we're spending our whole lives working for ministries, and yet we can think, oh, nobody wants to bother being a part of this. Yeah. And there's just so much that people will miss out on if we don't extend that invitation. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing to see what can happen when we do.
Yeah. I think a really interesting scripture to think about is, and I don't remember where it is, but where the Bible says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Yeah. And I think sometimes when I've read that in the past, I've thought it meant like, if I want to see where my heart is, I should look where my treasure is. And I do think it can mean that. But I also think it means that where we put our treasure is where our heart will naturally follow. And what I've seen is that as people become activated in their generosity, as people choose what they're going to support, oftentimes their emotional investment in that thing increases. So suddenly they care a lot more about the place they're supporting. Suddenly they want to know how things are going, how the ministry is spreading. I see that a lot with our Friends of Tuscarora program, where people make the decision that they're not going to be just a one-time donor, they're going to be an ongoing donor. Suddenly they're invested. They feel like they're a part of this ministry, and they want updates. They want to know how the money's getting spent. And not because they're critical, because suddenly they're emotionally invested in a way that they probably didn't expect before they made that gift.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So let me throw another situation at you. I think sometimes pastors, elders, other ministry leaders feel like they shouldn't talk about stewardship because it's not spiritual to talk about money. But it's somehow wrong that pastors shouldn't preach about stewardship or giving, that leaders should never talk about anything related to money. Yeah. Because it's not spiritual. What would you say to someone who said that?
Well, I think that's false, because I think that Jesus and Scripture talks about money constantly, right? And I think that when you look at the world today, like when you look at the number one idol that people have, I think it's money. It's what are we? So I think that it's a difficult thing to tackle. It's a sensitive thing to tackle, but I think it's a necessary thing to tackle. And I think that discipline of giving a portion of your treasure away without believing that you're getting something tangible in return is an important one for any Christian to carry out. Yeah. I think that also Scripture shows us that it doesn't matter how much we choose, right? The dollar amount doesn't always matter. It's the sacrifice that matters. And I think that, let me think about how I want to say this.
That's the power of proportional giving.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So that proportion of your income, it's not about the amount. It's about the proportion. It's
about the sacrifice.
How much of what you have you are giving.
Yeah. And I think that when you're in the pastor role, the ministry leader role, the fundraising role, it's always there's always the temptation in my heart, and I pray about this pretty pretty consistently, because I'm very aware that it's something I struggle with, is to look at a gift from someone and say, they could have done more, right? I think they could have done more. Or that's it. Like, really ugly things to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that, and maybe pastors aren't in that same role. I don't know how much pastors know exactly what people give. Like, as a fundraising professional, I can see giving history for individuals,
Mm-hmm.
but, or even to look at a church body and see the gifts that are coming in and to say like, oh, like they couldn't have done more. Like, do they not understand what we need? And it is not our responsibility to, well, I don't think it's not our privilege to know what sacrifice people are making. We have to make the needs known. I think that what we need to remember is to always tell people what we need and then just prayerfully receive what's
Mm-hmm.
given to us. I don't think it's for us to decide the sacrifice that's being made. I think that's especially
That's good.
when someone's giving in the spiritual sense, when they're not giving for a tax deduction. No one's giving for a tax deduction anymore, but when they're giving out of a spiritual inspiration, we want to assume and trust that the Holy Spirit is doing a work in that person and that they've measured that sacrifice for what they're capable of giving. And I would say that
Mm-hmm.
the Bible instructs us that everyone is capable of giving, and that we just have to decide what that looks like for each and every one of us. And for the pastors or the ministry leader or the fundraising professional, it's just making the need known. I think making the need known is probably the most important thing we can do.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, listening to you, one person's $10 gift might be a bigger gift than another person's $1,000 gift.
Yeah.
And that's between them and God.
Yeah.
It's not for us to know or discern, I don't think.
Yeah.
Yeah, making that opportunity known is making that need known, making that invitation, that's huge. And I think sometimes we can be tempted to think that, in ministry, I think every financial decision and issue that we deal with in ministry has spiritual implications.
Yeah.
And you can't pretend that talking about money doesn't have a spiritual aspect to it, because it's all connected.
Mm-hmm.
And generosity, stewardship is an aspect of being a disciple.
Yeah.
And if you don't talk about it, you don't allow people to grow as disciples.
Right.
You're preventing the growth of your members and the people that you're leading.
Yeah.
You're kind of stunting their spiritual growth.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
and I think that I've seen it happen time and time again, that the person who pushes themselves to be more generous, I'm not saying irresponsibly, I'm not saying selling your house and moving, I'm not saying that, but the person who pushes it just a little bit, who is slightly more generous than they're comfortable with, they always are blessed so tremendously because of what it does for their own heart. And that's what I think pastors and ministry leaders need to remember, is that it's going to be difficult up front, but what they're going to receive is so incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah, so whatever we can do to help people take, I think it can be overwhelming too when we think about, having someone in our church that maybe, I think a lot of leaders don't know who gives and who doesn't, but the idea of taking someone who doesn't give and helping them suddenly become a sacrificial giver, that feels overwhelming. But I think when we break it down to, you're giving opportunities to help people take a step on just one step on their stewardship journey, you're really having a huge impact in their lives.
Yeah.
And that's part of our calling as leaders to do that.
Well, and I think too, maybe different than Tuscarora, but a church, right? The idea of church is like, this is a family, this is a community, that this church together is our project. And especially if you're a pastor who's conflicted about asking people to give to the church, there's that message that can be sent that it's like, this is your church. Like, what you give impacts what we can do. Yeah. And that sense of like, if you're a parent, or you're not thinking about like, oh, I'm giving to my family, or I'm like, even as a child, I'm giving into my family because I need to, or it's my responsibility. It's like, I love this place and I want to better it and make it better for me and make it better for everybody. Like, no matter, it's just this out of love, like you're creating something together. There's this big body that's all growing and building and giving and receiving, and it's so happening simultaneously that it's difficult to track. And I think it's a really powerful thing that happens. Yeah, well said. Yeah. What have you learned specifically about talking about stewardship and generosity during COVID? Yeah. I think saying thank you is something that I've thought about every day. Because we had this outpouring of support that from one end, an administrative end of my job, it was printing letters, getting letters signed, getting them in the mail, making sure that we were tallying the numbers, making sure we were like, but just taking that time to consider every person, every gift, and be like, we had 200 people almost make a gift for the first time that have never made a gift to Tuscarora before. Wow. I can't even count the amount of people who made a gift that was not just double the size of their previous giving, but 3 times, 4 times the size of their previous giving. And just taking into account all of those things and just making sure that each and every person who supported us during that season of crisis were thanked, and we said thank you, and not just thank you, but thank you. This is what we're doing with your support. And that's something I'm working on right now, is a piece that's going to go back out to all the people who gave during our COVID-19 season to say, this is the ministry that happened because you gave. These are how many people came. This is how many kids were here hearing the gospel. These are the improvements we were able to make. And then also looking forward and saying, because we made those improvements this summer, now we're able to run these programs in the fall. Now we're able to run this EduCamp program. Now we're able, that because you helped us get ready for this season of challenges, now we are moving ahead and doing more. And so it's, it's not just what your money did in the moment, it's how your money is moving forward to help the ministry. And that allows people to see the role that their support played. And I think that that's really, and to say, it make them the hero, to say, because it very factually, like, we would not have been able to do what we did this summer without the people who supported Tuscarora. And that is an easy thing to say because it's 100% true. It's 1,000% true. And to say it's because of you that this happened, not because of the leadership team, not because of the facility, not because of the board of directors, though, not because of any person who's working, because this is their job, but it's because of the people who gave without anything in return that we were able to move forward and do it.
Wow. Yeah, thanks. Great way to look at it that way, to understand that. Yeah. So what kind of advice would you give to somebody in a ministry leadership role, and they haven't really done anything to communicate with their church body about stewardship and generosity? Yeah. What are 1 or 2 things that you would recommend they could do to get started? Yeah. Some simple first steps.
Yeah. So a good rule of thumb, or a rule that I live by in my fundraising career, is that anything that I'm asking for support for, I make sure that I'm supporting it first. Because I think that, like I said, you are changed by where you put your treasure. So if for instance, when I was working at Wagner, I didn't go to Wagner. So it wasn't quite the same experience of, this is my school, my love, but I chose to support it because then I felt I had that investment. I wanted to see the school thrive. So I think if you are going to try to lead members of your congregation or members of your ministry in exercising this generosity muscle, it's very important that you do it first so that you're supporting it as well. And I think also that gives a sense of authenticity to the message that you're putting forward. So it's much easier and much more, what's the word I want to use? It's much more compelling to say, I have supported this project and I'd like you to join me in doing that, than to
Yeah.
just turn around and
Yeah.
say, I think you should support this.
Yeah.
Because there's it's going to be clear that your heart's not invested. That's a very common thing. And I think that it's so important because, and then you can speak to your experience supporting an organization, supporting a ministry, supporting a church, and say, I gave and I am so happy I did. And I think you should do the same. That's just a message that resounds. And
Yeah, that's powerful.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. When I would preach and teach about stewardship,
Mm-hmm.
that it was more impactful when I spoke about it from that personal vantage point.
Mm-hmm.
The ways that I struggled, what the lessons I learned,
Yeah.
and that I'm an active giver
Yeah.
to that ministry as well.
Yeah.
And you can see too, churches, when the leaders do not give themselves,
Yeah.
the church will struggle.
Yeah.
Financially.
Well, and I think also
It's not an if, it's a definite, that definitely happens.
I think there's just there's a certain like an understanding of financial accountability. Like if you've made a gift to an organization, a church, or a ministry, and you've thought, okay, I made this sacrificial gift. I want to know that this organization is being responsible with my money. That then if you are the person who's plugged into doing that and you see other people supporting it, you're going to be extra careful that those gifts are being spent correctly, that they're being put into ministry needs, that they're being put where the donor wants to. I think that's important. That attention, that responsibility is so important in what we do, especially when you're dealing with other people's treasure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When I advise churches on, how much should leaders know about giving? And there's no black and white answer to that. But one thing that is important is that you have a way of determining if you're going to invite someone into a leadership role.
Yeah.
That you need to know that they are giving to that ministry, because you don't want to have you don't want to put someone in a leadership role who's making decisions about money if they're not themselves giving towards that ministry. Mm-hmm. It's a recipe for trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've worked at nonprofits and places where there's very clearly an expectation to give, and places where there's not. And I think the healthier ones are ones where, yes, you're looking at the leadership team and saying, we expect you to be financially invested in this as well. Yeah. So it's very interesting, and it's very subtle sometimes, but it has lasting impacts on the body that you're working in.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great, so to be personally invested in that. Anything else that, any other advice or insights you want to share?
I would say that like anything, this conversation is a muscle. You know what I mean? The more that you talk with people about your own generosity journey, the more you get comfortable with presenting it like an opportunity, not like an ask, the easier that it is. I love having these conversations now. It's not something that I'm constantly going in like, okay, remember, it's an opportunity. Remember, like, they're going to benefit. I'm not thinking through those things, because it's so much a part of me that I am just like, can't you join me in making this possible? This is going to be so exciting. It's going to be incredible for you to see what happens because you gave. And I think that I love going out and talking to donors. I love having conversations with people about their stories. I think that's another really important thing to remember, is that stories are most often our most valuable currency. Mm-hmm. That I can tell you how many touchless faucets we bought this summer, but you probably don't care, right? And you definitely don't care how much touchless faucets cost, or exactly how many phone calls I got from the cashless payment system about why it wasn't working. You know what I mean? Like, those are details. They are how money got spent, but nobody cares about that. What people care about is like, what's the story? Who came? Who was touched? You know, what did God do at Tuscarora this summer that couldn't have happened if I didn't support? And I think it's talking to people. The only way we can gather those things is talking to people and hearing, how did generosity transform you? And if you're a leader who's giving, the story you're going to tell is your own. And I think that I love telling my story. I love hearing other people's stories. I think giving is part of our nature, and it's something that the Bible instructs us to do, and we should remember that we shouldn't let the cultural taboo of finances scare the church out of talking to people and encouraging people to exercise their generosity muscle. That's what I think. Yeah, that would be my final point.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What a great job. Again, a little too smooth for our show, a little too professional, but we'll let it go this time.
Yeah.
It's a great note to end it on.
Yeah. I love talking about fundraising. I know it sounds funny. And I think when I tell that to people, people are like, that's a weird thing to love to talk about. Like an accountant being like, I love talking about spreadsheets. But I love talking about giving. I think if you really pushed a person, almost everybody has a sense of like, even if it's like, oh, I stopped at a lemonade stand and I bought a cup of lemonade that I didn't need because I wanted to give this $1 to a little girl on the side of the road, right? Like, who's really benefiting in that situation? Is it the little girl? Probably not. Like, what is she going to do with the $1? Like, I don't know, buy a Kit Kat? But the person who pulled over, gave the money, saw the smile, felt like they did something important. Like, that's the person who's benefiting. And I think that we as people are generous by nature. And almost everyone has a story like that. Yeah. You know, I think you see it all the time. People are generous. You see people buy each other dinner, send each other presents when they don't need to. You know, no one's doing those things to get something in return. That's generosity. And that brings us joy. Giving brings us joy. It's just suddenly when we talk about it in fundraising terms, then we forget that. But it's still true. Giving gives us joy.
Powerful note to end. Yeah, giving gives us joy, and I think it's one of the ways we're made in God's image, and that's one of the ways we reflect our Creator when we imitate His generosity. Yeah. Wow. Lindsay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
this
Lindsay
was so
Rosado,
much fun.
for being our guest today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I know we'd love to have you back on sometime.
Please. This is fun. I'm having a good time. This is a fancy little microphone.
Yes, fancy computer machines.
Yes. Technology, guys.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
And all the little, I think there's little chipmunks inside this to make it work.
Or elves, something. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. It's about all I know about it.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.
God bless you.
God bless you as well.
Thanks.
Guys, what a great episode with Lindsay. Ryan, you did a really good job.
Thanks. She was a great guest.
I was a little upset about the Catan comment. I did. For those of you who know me, they know that I really enjoy board games. One of the board games that I really like the most is Settlers of Catan. So much so
one of my favorites,
that it's one of my personal forms of evangelism to get everyone to play. And so you could imagine how devastated I've been for years that Lindsay just straight up refused. Like, she didn't even give it a chance. She's like, no, I had such a terrible time with it the first time that I will never play it again. So
she's right. Her reasons.
Oh, totally. Like, when she said that, I said, oh yeah, that is true.
I always tell, first time.
But what's really important to tell people, so this is pretty important when it comes to evangelism too. What's really important when you introduce Settlers of Catan to people is just to make sure that you're genuine about it. So usually what I tell people about Settlers is the first game, you're going to understand the game. And by the end of the game, you're going to want to play a second game because of all the knowledge that you've learned in the first game. But the first game is a grind.
Yep.
But if you don't tell people that up front, then they really just feel like they're getting taken advantage of, which is terrible.
Yep.
So shame on you, whoever did that to Lindsay. But I'm going to work really hard because I know one day my charisma and smile and annoyance is going to finally get Lindsay to crack, and she's going to play Settlers of Catan, and it's going to be a glorious day. Also, you could probably persuade her. I'm going to make it my own personal mission now on every single one of Tuscarora's Facebook posts and Instagram posts. I'm literally going to post, play Settlers of Catan with me. Every post. I'm going to become Tuscarora's top fan for literally just posting, play Settlers of Catan with me.
For becoming a troll.
It's not trolling. It is a form of evangelism. It's just a consistent picking of wanting what's best for Lindsay, which is to play Settlers of Catan. So it's happening, Lindsay. And not because it's happening because I care about you. And I want you to know that Settlers of Catan is for all people, including you, even if you didn't like it the first time. So let's give it a second go. But this time, play with me instead. And it'll be a totally different experience. And it'll be really good.
And if Mike had been able to hear anything, Lindsay, that you said about stewardship, but he couldn't because of what was said about Settlers. But if he'd been able to hear any of it, he would have said that was a great interview.
Oh, it was. It was a fantastic
so
interview. I learned a lot from it, and I appreciated her sharing a little bit about who she is, and then also talking to us about that too. So to our listeners, thanks for listening. We appreciate you tuning into the show today. We would love to cover topics that you guys are interested in. So if you have any that are kicking around in your brain and you'd like to email us, you can at podcast@clbforge.org. So podcast@clbforge.org. Don't forget to subscribe so that when a new podcast drops, you can be the first one to listen to it and get mad props from Ryan and I. If you're the first one to listen to it, make sure you comment, because we might be sending out gifts, or at least Ryan will be sending out gifts to you if you're the first person to comment, like, I listened to it first, and then and it would be great. So
thanks for volunteering me for that.
No problem. It's all gift. It's all gift.
That's a future episode topic.
All right, great. And then we'd love it if you could share the podcast with a friend or a colleague. Lindsay, thanks again for being the guest on our show today, and we look forward to future podcasts. Everybody have a great day. See ya.